Good afternoon, everyone. We are welcome here today at the discussion that is a part of 5th Ukrainian Contemporary Art Triennale Ukrainian cross-section with theme Ukraine Unmuted. So we are happy to see you here at the place, and also everyone who is watching us online. You're welcome to participate in this discussion, and I pass the microphone for moderator of this discussion, Oksana Forostina.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for having us here, and thanks to all team of Kaunas 2022 for inviting us and for making it happen. That's our fourth discussion, and that's the first discussion we have actually at the place where Ukrainian exhibition was opened about a month ago. So that's we are finally here. If you are in Kaunas, so please come and have a look. It's still open. So this last discussion of the four we already had, I believe that will be the most practical, the most down to earth conversation with people who are actually doing cultural diplomacy and promotion culture basically from 9 to 5, or to be honest, from 9 to 9, or sometimes 24/7. Rather 24/7. I think it will not be an exaggeration to say that for our countries, Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine, this job is much more challenging than for people from so-called big cultures, you know, big institutions, big cultures, big legacy. And my first question to all of you, I will present you shortly in a minute. My first question, like a warm-up, will be, maybe some anecdotes about the most funny or maybe most sad stereotypes you faced when you just started. Pawel Potoroczyn was a director of Adam Mickiewicz Institute in Poland for many years, but before that, after that, deeply involved in promotion Polish culture abroad, particularly in United States and in Britain. But as far as I remember, you started even before Poland became an independent country. So that was long ago, and maybe you give us some context how it was back then.
Well, bad and ugly and poor. I claim to have served my country for over 40 years. All of it within largely broadly understood culture industry. I began as a samizdat publisher, 1981. Then the martial law arrived. Oh, I did time in jail, and proud of it. And there was this one night in June 1989 when I went, virtually one night, I went to bed as dissident and woke up as an entrepreneur. Being a clandestine samizdat publisher, I realized that now I can do the same thing quite legally, in broad light. So, yes, and then I started, like many my friends, colleagues, acquaintances, we started making money. And I kept making money for 2 or 3 years. And one day I realized that I've been doing crappy things for big money, and I decided to, as of now, I'd be doing big things for crappy money. And I joined foreign service. And it was the smartest decision I have ever made in my professional life. I've been appointed cultural attaché in our consulate general in Los Angeles, California. Then I was appointed first director of Polish Cultural Institute in New York City, which is a diplomatic mission. And when I say the first one, I mean it quite literally. There was me, my suitcase, and marching orders to, show what I can. And then my last appointment in Foreign Service was in 2005 in London. And as of 2008, I served as a director of Polish Adam Mickiewicz Institute based in Warsaw. Remember Godfather Part 2, Don Corleone. I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. So the Minister of Culture kidnapped me from London and transplanted to Warsaw, and it was one of the smartest decisions, the second smartest decision in my life to accept this invitation, because I had 8 consecutive years of unprecedented flight. So this would be by the way of introduction myself.
But what was challenging when you started to promote Polish culture abroad? Because as far as I can judge, there is some stereotype, some expectation, for better or for good, about what is Polish culture.
Well, I clearly remember one of the major performing arts presenter, telling me clearly, openly, with a quite rude or brutal sentence, saying, "You know what, I don't want anything from your shop." That was quite challenging. And I've been faced with this negligence or complete lack of interest or ignorance, really, on so many occasions that I just got accustomed to it. I kept repeating that you can have a great project and you cannot have it. The choice is yours. I'm very much willing to participate in whatever is involved. And if you choose not to have it, well, I'll make sure that your stakeholders know it, that your audience know it. It's kind of a little blackmail.
And thank you, Pawel. We will make another round about how to deal with that. But now I would like to ask the same question to Gintara Masteikaite. She is also a producer, so at some point you're colleagues, and you basically, correct me if I'm wrong, you promote Lithuanian dance art abroad, mostly abroad, and you're a cultural leader here. So the same question for you: what do you feel this kind of conflict of expectation? Do people expect something from you because you're from Lithuania, or are they totally caught by surprise? So give us some idea how it works for you.
You know, when I started to work in the culture field, in contemporary dance field specifically, everything started here in Kaunas. I joined Kaunas our dance company, which is based here, and this year celebrates 40 years anniversary. When I joined, I grew up in a very small village town, let's say, and first time I saw contemporary dance, it was actually when I joined the company, and I remember my first reaction: oh my God, what is it? I don't understand anything. I don't know what it's about, actually. So my journey with contemporary dance actually is very similar with my work. So it was step by step, going like deeper and knowing more and learning more, meeting people, talking about it. When I started to work and represent contemporary dance and circus and bring some performing arts here to Lithuania and start some new initiatives, I always, in very beginning, I was like, yes, I'm alone. Nobody knows Lithuania, so there's no expectations at all, Because if you don't know the country and you don't know the culture, you don't have any expectations. You can be curious or not, it depends where you are, you know. So I was using my hair. Now it's not really blonde, but it used to be blonde and it will be blonde soon. So I was using my hair, and I was kind of, you know, young and very ambitious, and I was going straight to people, the people who are leading big institutions, the people who are making big decisions, and going straight to them, representing myself, saying my name, saying from where I am, and starting to talk about our artist. And for most of them, it was a shock, of course, because you have this diplomacy, how to do, yeah? You have to meet someone to talk. But I was very young and very ambitious, and I had a lot of dreams. And actually, it helped me. It helped me to shorter some ways. And now, you know, when I meet the same people after a while, after 10 years, they said, because of that, because you were so brave to come and to put your name on the table, I was curious to, you know, to go and to start a relationship, like work a relationship with you, to get to know you, and through you to know the culture, and through you to know the contemporary dance. Of course, if you're talking about my field I represent, contemporary dance is very small, it's still very young, and we're just starting, comparing with France, Germany. But because we are young, we are fresh and very ambitious. So this is a difference between big cultures, and that's because we are very interesting to other people and other institutions and other festivals. And I think people feel the enthusiasm we have and the power we have because of this huge enthusiasm.
But when you started, could you tell us idea what about the period, about the broader context? Lithuania was
We were
already...
in yes, it was in the middle of independence, and of course the field was much smaller than now. So we worked with bigger names, with bigger companies, known companies in a field, but everything was on the, you know, on verge. It was changing. It was very interesting beginning, and actually because of that, I also managed to push some projects quite far internationally because of that, because of you know. Because I managed to catch the moment, for example, to represent some companies abroad at the right moment. Like, for example, we have one company which creates performances for babies, and we started 15 years ago, and I joined them after a while, and we decided, let's try to make it international and well-known company. And because of being in a small country, because of starting a new initiatives, because being first, we managed to catch, you know, the fairy tale somehow, and we did these amazing tours around the globe. We, you know, like from China at that moment to South America, Canada, in all Europe, in some Arab countries, and companies from like Germany and France were asking, how come, how you did that, you know, because we have money, we have knowledge, we have support systems, and you actually don't have anything, and you did it. But because of enthusiasm and because of really going straight to the wall, you know, and trying our best to convince others, but we are the same, sometimes we are even better, and we have this power and energy to try.
Thank you. Volodymyr Sheiko came from Ukraine. He's the head of Ukrainian Institute, and this institution is relatively new comparing to other countries. So you have these fresh impressions, and but please give us again the idea about the period when you just started, and what are you doing now? Because now we're of course aware of the situation and of the challenges and the mission. The mission maybe it's a bit changed, unfortunately. And I would also mention that you had some experience with this big culture, so-called, because Volodymyr worked in British Council in Ukraine for many years as well. So please tell us the story.
Sure. Thank you, Oksana. Hello, everyone. Good to see you, and thank you for coming. The Ukrainian Institute is Ukraine's cultural diplomacy agency, which was established in 2018. And it was a very interesting period in Ukraine's contemporary history, which was just a few years after the Maidan revolution in 2014. So the Institute, much like some other institutions of culture in Ukraine, the so-called new institutions, were established after the revolution as part of this huge drive for reform and huge kind of bottom-up civil society-driven desire for change in the country, and between, of course, the full-scale invasion that started in February this year. So the Institute has never worked in a peaceful, stable, sustained period of time. It has always been in a flux. It has always gone through massive change. It has always had to reflect and on the events happening around, including the pandemic that literally could have paralyzed us for 2 years, but didn't, luckily. And today, of course, we have a huge challenge ahead of us to respond to this incredible passion to learn more about Ukraine that we see coming from everywhere in the world, and this incredible solidarity that we have been feeling, particularly from our friends, true friends in Lithuania, for which I'm really, really grateful. So it's a very, funny time in a way that we want to laugh at it, but it's a time of constant flux, constant change, constant shifts of priorities, constant fight for survival, actually, because today I came from Kyiv, where was no electricity, no water supply, no central heating, and we as a team must have worked somehow chasing electricity all around town just to make sure that we deliver to our commitments and we work with partners and we deliver our projects in time and not fail to do so. But when I started in 2018, our biggest project was the cultural year between Ukraine and Austria in 2019, which we had to program literally in 2 months' time. And, those of you who have produced or programmed big cultural projects, you know that it's nothing. You can't program a cultural year in 2 months' time, particularly in a country like Austria, which tends to sort of sit on the kind of more conservative side of the spectrum in terms of how it works and the length certain processes and agreements take. And I remember my team and I coming to Austria on a study visit, basically to broker deals with the cultural institutions in Austria, and we were looked at as like we were crazy people, some crazy young people coming from this unknown country somewhere in the east, trying to propose projects that they would have liked to program like 5 years ago to make them to deliver them in time. And this is a very familiar feeling that Gintara just shared with us, that this is our strength, actually, strength of countries and societies of this part of the world, of Central and Eastern Europe, that we are able to mobilize very quickly, we're able to deliver very quickly, we're able to create very quickly, change, adapt, be very energetic, propose something that is unconventional, that is striking, that is actually quite competitive when it comes to audience preferences or, just society at large. And this is probably one of our selling points of our cultures that we have to offer. We are looked down at, that is very true, quite often. A lot of doors, until February at least, for Ukraine have remained closed in the so-called big Western cultures because we're not interested to them, not relevant, unknown, unfamiliar. And, there was this reluctance to even interact with that unknown gray part of the world because there is something much more familiar and reliable, trustworthy, just next door. So why would you go any further than basically Warsaw, I would say, to the east? So We had to fight those preconceptions quite a lot, but this, I think, always struck our partners internationally, this ability to kind of inject some fresh blood, if I may use this metaphor, in programming of international institutions and festivals, and this is quite often what they really lack, I think.
Thank you. And I think it's very familiar for many Ukrainians who works internationally that you have to start from scratches to explain yourself from point zero. And Pawel, I have a question for you. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but was your situation really showing the invisible? Because from where I sit, it seems to me that you had some legacy, some work done before you, like, you know, started from Hotel Lambert, yeah, in 19th century, and then Kultura. So you have some Polish institution abroad who did some work before you, before Poland became independent in 1989. So did you feel it helped, or maybe that's just my illusion?
Well, I couldn't agree with you that we have had some competent and effective institutions telling Poland before 1989. Yet, we have had some legends, like Andrzej Wajda, Krzysztof Penderecki, Grotowski, Kantor. I could go like this for probably half an hour. And we built on them, on those...
on names.
It's a little more than just individuals and names, because there is always a major legend behind all of those talents. I would never consider them maybe icons. Maybe this should be the term. And we, that's ugly word, but we did use them as a springboard for our operation after 1989. Before 1989, of course, we had a network of Polish cultural institutes abroad, in Paris, in London, in Berlin, in Bonn, I'm sorry, and in Prague, in Sofia, in Bucharest. 12 or 13 of those. Yet there were actually international foreign locations for Polish intelligence services. This was the cover-up for Polish intelligence, communist secret service. So completely useless, except they had certain real estate in those capitals. So I couldn't possibly tell that we had anything beyond certain Nobel Prize laureates, Oscar winners, and we built our own as institutional. Actually, Polska as a brand has been built on the back of those icons. If that answers your question, we have very early adopted what I think has made or is making the operation of the Adam Mickiewicz Institute quite effective is also Adam Mickiewicz himself. Probably not too many of you know, happens to know, but Adam Mickiewicz has got monuments all over Central Europe, and then of course in Paris and in Istanbul and other places. But if you think of him as too many people tend to think that Adam Mickiewicz was just one of the romantic poets of an era. Well, get this. Friends with Pushkin. They kept partying day in, day out. I mean, like if they invented the term binge drinking in St. Petersburg here. I mean it. 2 years of constant party. Friends with Goethe. Goethe has dedicated 2 poems to Mickiewicz and offered him a quail. A quail from Goethe in 19th century Europe was probably more than a Nobel Prize today. then friends with Byron, translated Lord George Byron into Polish, and became first foreign member of l'Académie Française. There were no foreign womanizer, opium smoker, heavy drinker. You may think of him as if punk rock had been invented in the 19th century, he would be a punk rock. Think of him as a Umberto Eco / Jim Morrison of 19th century. That's Adam Mickiewicz. And having a figure like this on our flag, that helped a lot. That helped adopt certain less inflated, if you know what I mean, approach to the very idea of cultural exchange.
So I bet you actually translated it this way, you know, that Mickiewicz is a kind of punk of 19th century when you worked. Yeah?
And believe it or not, it has worked. I mean, I'm not just saying so that it has worked. On my watch, in my 8 years at the Adam Mickiewicz Institute, we have amassed 40 million audience. And that's not that we put a sculpture in a public space and counted people who glanced at it. No, that's tickets sold. 40 million tickets sold to our concerts, performances, exhibitions, and so on. So I can prove that it worked with numbers.
Thank you. Gintare, can you tell us something about the legacy you had? Was it institutional legacy or names, as in case of Pawel? So what helped you?
Yeah, so I work really with very young scene, still very niche. It's very like in Lithuania also, it's very young scene. And then I started to work in a field where I work now, specifically with the Dance Information Center. So it was already 20 years, celebrating 20 years anniversary. So of course, I jumped into an institution which is with the legacy, with the knowledge, with the network, with a lot of things done by very small group of people and one specific leader, Audronis Imbrasas, who was like brave enough to create such a kind of institution in Lithuania without a contemporary dance field, established contemporary dance field. And he started this initiative because he has a vision, but because of his institution, we can help to the scene to grow up and to help to support and to be, of course, to bring more knowledge from abroad to our country. And in a few years later, to present ourselves as a contemporary country, having contemporary performing arts field, even super small one. So yes, I had a lot of work done before me, but of course, when I came I joined the institution, I started to work with the field. It was kind of shift moment between elder generation and new generation coming. So it was a very interesting moment. Actually, it's still going on. We have a lot of young artists who now leaves the country, moves abroad. They go to universities and they stays. And our job is somehow to keep connection with them because we are so small. For us, it's very important to keep these networks in between. And for example, when I'm talking with my foreign colleagues and I'm saying what we're trying to keep connection and a network, a personal connection actually with each dancer, choreographer, and producer who lives abroad, because it's important for us to keep the connection and to somehow to bring them back to our audiences and to our country. My colleagues like, wow, how you can do it, it's impossible in our countries because our field is so big, so international, and so on. But in our case, it's possible. It's manageable still. I don't know for how long, but still it's manageable. We can have this personal connection. So this is a strong point, and also now we also flexible abroad internationally because we have this amazing community which is spread in Europe, and we can present them as a part of our country, you know. And sometimes when artists apply somewhere for some open calls, I always say, please do not forget to put Lithuania, even you already lived 10 years in France, Belgium, because it's very important to represent from where you are. And because you will write Lithuania, you will sometimes you know, you are more interesting to institutions, because you bring another identity, you bring another culture background, you bring another knowledge, you bring another history, you know. So this is like we teaching our young generation to keep, you know, Lithuania close. Even sometimes we want to run away and say, no, now I finished university in Belgium, I'm Belgian, you know. But yeah, but after a while, of course, they understand, they learn, and they use it. Yeah.
Thank you. We already know, Volodya, that you started from scratches, and my idea that unfortunately, we didn't have anyone in Ukraine who put a foot in the door for us in 19th century or in 20th century, and sometimes we had to deal with the ideas of Ukrainian legacy, which is not actually Ukrainian, and vice versa. We had to prove what is actually ours. What is your foundation? What you stand on in your work, in your daily work?
It's a big question, and sometimes I feel I have no foundation, and sometimes I feel the foundation is so rock solid that that, you know, it keeps me basically going every single day. And I really appreciate what Pawel said about those kind of landmark, you know, household names of the 20th century that were the foundation or the roots or the basically the milestones that you. That your identity relied on and was constructed out of. In the case of Ukraine, I think it was a bit more complicated than that, because obviously a great deal of our cultural legacy was taken away from Ukraine and appropriated by Russia as part of its imperialistic policies towards the whole region, not just Ukraine. Part of our heritage was banned in the early 20th century and also in the middle 20th century, and long forgotten. And it's only until, you know, very recently that we started to discover this enormous part of our cultural heritage that was basically unknown to so many Ukrainians before. And then during the communist rule, of course, it was only possible to promote internationally those names who were approved and endorsed or directly, you know, promoted by the communists, by the totalitarian regime. So this makes this foundation and this picture of Ukrainian culture that we had to work with now very fragmented, very eclectic, very uneven. And then when I remember the first strategic session when we had at the Ukrainian Institute back in 2018, and there was a question, how do we make kind of a sort of a cultural canon, like a golden standard of Ukrainian culture? Let's have like 100 names of our great artists, writers, filmmakers, musicians, composers, who we will basically take and then work with, promote, endorse, research, etc., etc. And we kind of felt that it was impossible to put together such a list. It would be very artificial. It would be very contested. It would need years of discussions, years of research, years of debate, years of, you know, dialogue, intercultural dialogue with other nations, neighboring nations, contested, you know, nations to kind of figure out what is ours, what is not ours, how to constitute this golden standard of a culture. Can we have one at all, and should we have one? So these are big questions. I don't have really answers up until now, but what I feel is that this fluidity, this lack of a concrete framework is actually a benefit. I really love it, because you can take whatever you want and have it as part of Ukraine's cultural diplomacy. You can take any name, you can take any phenomenon, you can take any milestone in history that is, of course, related to our country, remotely or directly, and then you can have a conversation about it. You can have an artistic project about it. You can have a new commission, a discussion, a research, an exchange, and anything in between that basically makes you free. It sets you free in your cultural diplomacy attempts. You don't have to work with a fixed set of names or fixed set of products or fixed set of, I don't know, heritage objects. And that makes us, I think, much more free in our programming activities and much more flexible in terms of how we can react to the reality around us and to the historic circumstances that we have found ourselves in. I find it very inspiring, actually.
Thanks. I would like all of you to talk a bit about state and public institution and public funds, but to bridge from our previous question to that, I would ask Pawel to share his ideas. What actually puzzled me, why state at large wish to promote old names most, I guess you faced it that if I were on your place, I would feel much confident, much more protected if I promote big names from 19th century. It's a kind of safe option. And why do you think that people who are actually in ministers and in governments like these old guys so much?
Well, first, it might come as a surprise to you, but the term promotion was banned at the Mickiewicz Institute. It was strictly prohibited. The use of this word was strictly prohibited. I was actually fining people, 10 zloty each, for using word promotion. It was, we didn't do no promotion. Promotion is slightly rotten tomatoes in a Tesco or whatever it's called, this major chain of huge grocery stores. So we didn't promote anything. In our strategic document, we have described 360 degrees of what we've been doing with one word, relationship. We were in the business of initiating, maintaining, sustaining, evaluating and assessing and capitalizing on relationships. And I can probably briefly, shortly, concisely explain why. In the US, I've worked there for 10 years, so it's quite a lot of time. In the US, when you first approach a major institution or a heavy hitter or a public figure or just a celebrity, one is usually confronted with a highly sophisticated system of trenches, bunkers, barbed wires, and minefields. It's called assistant to the assistant to the assistant to the assistant. So by the time one reaches the assistant, the proper person who at least sees the boss's calendar, the first question one is asked is, what is the nature of your call? Is it personal or business? And I have quickly learned to answer, it's a personal business. And that's at the very core of this non-transactional idea of cultural diplomacy. Make it personal. That's by the way of avoiding your question. Now to answer, would you really think that Mickiewicz or Miłosz, we're in Lithuania, or Wajda, or Różewicz, or Stanisław Lem are the really old guys?
No, I mean like 19th century, this period when nations was established, and well, my idea, you correct me if I'm wrong, but my idea that in our part of the world, to promote this 19th century name is a kind of revenge, because we couldn't do it back then properly, and now we have to catch up with these big cultures with big 19th century names.
If this weren't for these big 19th century names, there wouldn't be Poland. Full stop. I mean, Poland throughout 19th century survived as a cultural concept, as an idea, and the language. That's why.
Okay, and that actually was a bridge question to our conversation about state and public institution. So I think that your jobs is very much dependent of how good public institutions are in general. And maybe you should start with that. So because there is an upside and downside of that, and how to balance.
You're perfectly right. I couldn't agree more. If it weren't for the quality and standards and deliverance of public institutions in Poland, I would have nothing to harvest on. I mean, my organization would have nothing to harvest on. Would have nothing to show outside of Poland if it weren't for the major festivals, which are showcases of best Polish performing arts or film, if it weren't for the literary festival, and so on and so on. Of course, the quality of the institutions determine truly the not quality, but probably poignancy of cultural diplomacy.
And Gintara, do you have a story about how you?
My case, our case, it's a bit different. I represent independent scene. So it's a non-profit organizations and independent field, which is, we don't have any national institution to support contemporary dance. We don't have any theater for contemporary dance. We don't have any space dedicated for contemporary dance. We don't have any company like getting fund just because we are a contemporary dance company. Of course, we are funded, like we have one here, a city funded company. We have in Klaipėda and Vilnius, like in short term funded, like 3 years funded. But it's not like a field which is strongly supported by the states. And I think we existing the same amount, like the same, you know, we are born together with independency. So it's very independent scene in like contemporary scene. And every year we have to fight for our existence. And now it's a bit easier because we have recognition, we have some funding from Ministry of Culture, from Council of Culture, but still we are fighting for our existence and we have to prove what we are and what we do. And all our initiatives, which is related with international networking and representing and creating relationships, I really like this, not promoting actually, but all the projects, big projects and big success stories are based on creating relationship of how strong our relationships are with other countries, with other institutions, with other presenters. And it's most of the times very personal, based on personal initiatives, personal connections. It's not like, you know, someone called to someone and asked to do something. It's because we wanted to go somewhere. We wanted to put our feet in a festival, in institution. We managed to prove it or not. Yeah, so this is like, of course, it's also a complex. It's part of Lithuanian vision, where we want to be. We're not fighting against it, but we have to always push ourselves a bit further because we don't have this, you know, someone who's standing behind us and saying, go for it. We have to, most of the time we say, we are going to this direction, you support us or not. And most of the time we go to Ministry of Culture, we have here colleagues, our dear colleagues, we know what we you know, sometimes we're coming with new ideas and we're offering the new ideas, we're putting on the table and saying, look, we can do this and this, you help us, or let's figure out how we can work together. So it's a bit different. We have a legacy, of course we have a culture background as a country, we have also these big names, you know, Lithuania has a lot of great names from culture field, which helps us to promote Lithuania as a country. But if we are talking about the field I represent, it's very young, it's very fresh, and it's based actually most of the time on storytellings. You know, we just had a French delegation in our country because we are planning this culture year, Lithuanian culture year in France in 2024. And the most interesting thing about contemporary dance was the storytelling, how we started to look for dancers 40 years ago, 30 years ago. We were looking dancers in streets. The companies, the choreographers who started contemporary dance, they were looking dancers in streets and inviting young people to come to join studios. And for this big country, you know, like France, it was, wow, this is something unique. So yeah, we are using storytelling like our, you know, how we started, how we're dealing with that, what we are doing to continue to grow, you know, like to grow as a field, as a sector. And yeah, this is interesting for bigger cultures because we trying to use shortcuts most of the time, you know, like really, because we are missing few, like, you know, decades of years, yeah.
And how long did it take for you to actually become noticed for the public institution, for municipalities? So it took some work. Yeah?
Of course, it took some work, and still we're working. You know, I mean, our institution is like Dance Information Center. It's like 27 years already existing, and we have a structural funding, but of course it's small. We're fighting for more, and we are taking part in you know, culture policy. We are active as culture workers. We are trying to show our presence, to take part in all initiatives and to prove what we have to be. But we are, you know, we equal to other forms. We equal to theater, we equal to literature, we equal to visual arts, and we have to bring these contemporary art forms to public because there is a need. Also, what we bring is very useful to solve some questions, but also it's very useful for, you know, for contemporary country as an identity. It's a part of it. It's expression form and it's communication form, and it's amazing art form to represent country because of a, you know, this unique, not unique, but actually a very easy, very accessible art form, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's actually an advantage. You don't need to know Lithuanian to understand you.
It's like dance everywhere is the same. I mean, the same language, like movement language, yeah, body language.
Thanks. Vladimir, the same question for you about this, in many ways, difficult relations of culture in general and public institution and government. And in your case, I would like to explain before and after. Again, 2018, relatively calm, relatively successful period. Then COVID, and now the invasion. You know, and priorities are shifting all the time. So how do you deal with it?
Well, I would first like to kind of go back to the question of this sort of 19th century type of
Please do.
cultural pantheon that is loved and cherished by lots of people, cultural diplomats and governments alike. And of course, it's a foundation that I think many countries in our region can claim to be formative for ourselves today. So without the big names of Ukrainian literature, intellectual thought, and visual art of the 19th century, we would not have existed as an independent state today. But it's not the only point. It's because people like to play it safe, and it's perfectly easy to play safe with people who have died a long time ago, who are very easily, pigeonholed into whatever form and shape you're comfortable with or need to assume. They can't speak for themselves, you know. The general knowledge about them is quite often very limited. So basically, you can create a myth, and you can promote a myth, you can communicate a myth to someone's objectives, to someone's policies, and that's playing it safe. That's why, from my experience, politicians, government leaders quite often are very, very much afraid of contemporary art because it's unpredictable, it's honest, it's relevant, it's outspoken, it's brave, it cannot be censored. Otherwise, you would have a huge trouble on your hands. And we quite often have heard comments for our work like, "Are you not afraid to put this artist in this exhibition? Are you sure that they will say the right thing? Or are you sure that their work will not be misinterpreted or create any kind of scandal or an issue with our partner government in another country?" And that makes me laugh, because this is completely missing out on the point of cultural relations and contemporary culture as such, which is about honest conversation, which is about, honest statements, provocation. It's about feeling the nerve of today, reflecting on it. How can you be dishonest about it? How can you artificially do that? How can you follow someone's agenda? How can you do some censorship in that respect? You would stop being an artist if you would do so. So for me, I guess it's what we sometimes do. It's kind of how do I say, like a partisan work in a way. So we kind of inject in our projects those little or big provocations that actually maintain this very honest and sometimes provocative cultural dialogue, because that's how it should be today. 19th century is great, but equally, let's move on. Respectfully, of course, respectfully, mindfully, knowing our past, respecting and showcasing it. But let's not put those people kind of in a bronze statue on a pedestal, because there were people just like us, like you said, punks of the 19th century. So why not sort of make this bridge with today, not be afraid of it? And with respect to your question about today, there is indeed a huge drive, in Ukraine for cultural diplomacy to be all about the war, because the war is so total, it fills every single minute of your and second of your being, of your time, of your thoughts, of your existence. And I think it's a trap. It's a trap to just limit your cultural diplomacy to war, because there is much more to our existence than just war. There is a lot of humanity, there is a lot of solidarity, support, there is a lot of friendliness, a lot of compassion, sympathy, and just vibrant everyday life that still keeps going on even in the incredible hardships that people go through today. So I guess my challenge is to balance indeed how we talk about the war and how we sustain this public interest for Ukraine and support and political support internationally through cultural diplomacy, but also tell those human stories that are not war-related, that are not war-driven, that tell, a much wider story of my country. That's a challenge, and that's a constant kind of daily balancing out.
Thank you, and I would like to pick up here and address the next question to Pawel. Again, a little bit of retrospective. If we have some knowledge about cultural diplomacy, we understand that that's this 24/7 work to be done. But people from outside usually have their own ideas of how necessary it is, and can you tell us about, from your experience, from your 40 years of experience, can you tell us about these dynamics, how Polish society felt this sense of urgency, to show themselves outside?
Before I get to your, I have to refer to what Volodymyr has said, because it's probably the key importance of the intellectual core of cultural diplomacy. First, there's two, as far as I see it, there's two principles of it. One is arm's length. If cultural diplomacy is to be credible, trustworthy, it's got to be conveyed by arm's length organizations. Arm's length, of course, you've got to decide the balance between two arms. One is to keep stakeholders at bay, and the other one serves to extort the money from them. So you've got to keep the balance between those two arms. But we're all too familiar with that our stakeholders, mostly these political decision makers, they do have those curatorial ambitions. They are incompetent, very often, they are incompetent enough to come to us and tell us, oh, this is better artist than this one, or this is safer artist than this one. So keeping them at arm's length is of a crucial importance. Actually, one of my role, at least at the Mickiewicz Institute, was to persuade my overseers, my stakeholders, that curatorial ambitions of politicians harm both culture and politics. I managed, luckily, strangely enough, I managed to do that. And the other thing that so importantly Volodymyr has touched upon is, let me bring you an anecdote. In 2008, I have founded extension, in conjunction with a major, very reputable college in Warsaw, we have launched a program, extension program in cultural diplomacy. And when first class was graduating at this diploma handing ceremony, a young man came to me and asked me, so what exactly is the difference between conventional diplomacy and cultural diplomacy? And I was very clear and told him, well, son, conventional diplomacy tells the story. Cultural diplomacy tells the truth. No matter how complex, complicated, perplexing, compromising, and in many cases, even hysterically funny, this truth could be. There's two reasons to it. First one is 3,000 years old. I mean, we know from Aristotle that only truth is beautiful. The whole civilization has been founded on this sentence. And why would we mess with it? And the other is quite pragmatic, and it brings me to answer to your question. The other is quite pragmatic, namely, every cultural institution from our part of the world aspires to attention, to time, really, of privileged, highly educated, well-read, well-traveled audience. Actually, the audiences that pay the highest taxes, which means that they enjoy most political influence. This is our target, if you forgive me the word. Those people, being well-read, well-traveled, smart, educated, and so on, they are perfectly immunized against all kinds of propaganda. Propaganda, this sugar-coated pictures, this pinkish things, this kitschy landschafts, they don't sell. Truth still does. Again, no matter how complex, complicated, perplexing the truth could be. And since we are aspiring for their time, why would we bore them to oblivion by delivering some propaganda bullshit? It's wasting taxpayers' money. And that, I think, would be the best to the best of my knowledge, answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. And Gintara, maybe you have some story about how you actually felt that you are making an impact, because that's a big difference for you, because you are independent, but you're making an impact. You know, you represent Lithuania outside of the country. And do you remember the moment when you felt, okay, that's it?
Actually, since February 24, we did a lot of impact, and personally we felt like what we're doing as a country in culture diplomacy, a huge impact in other countries in being part of international networks, being part of international conferences, speaking with colleagues, and like trying to explain what's, what we as a country with our history and past history, what we can offer and how we can help to represent also Ukraine. Small story, 2 weeks ago, I was in Canada, in Montreal. I was attending one of the biggest performing arts fair in Canada and North America, and it was 1,000 attendees from professionals, artists, and so on. And it was no single topic about Ukraine. It was zero. Like we were talking about climate change, we were talking about, diversity, inclusion, all this bullshit what's going around on the papers, like checklists, check, 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 check. And it was like, from the very first day, I was like, it's wrong. It's like really, really wrong. I felt very bad actually walking around all these people and talking to them, and it was nice to catch up after 2 or 3 years not traveling because of COVID and seeing, colleagues from Australia, New Zealand, Asia, South America, and having this very important meeting. And there's no single topic about what's happening now and how it will affect us as a culture workers. Also, what does it mean, now to have a war in Europe, and how to deal with Russian artists, with Ukrainian artists. We have a lot of stories now going around, a lot of great ideas how to put artists together to make this dialogue on the stage and so on and so on. So I was participating in the final discussion about dance networks. I was only one from Europe on the panel. So it was one person from Canada, from North America, and me. And we were talking, representing what we are doing. And I was like, I did my presentation, and then I couldn't hold myself. And I was like, yeah, let's talk about war. Let's talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about what's happening here. And it was very interesting reaction. People started to clap. It was 100 people in the audience, and they started to clap. Because probably, because we are so close and because we have a history, so I was personally I felt personally that I need to speak. I need to do something. And to do this small step, and to do, actually it was quite a big thing, in that room. And the director came, was working in a program, and he said, yeah, sorry, it's important, but actually we're afraid to put this topic on the table in Canada. We were afraid to have a discussion around it. So we wanted to keep it, safe. Yes, safe. So we can make an impact, being from very small country with our own history, and being as diplomats and advocates for now what's happening. And in recent past, in past 9 months, we did a lot, each of us who works in the culture field here in Lithuania, and me personally, we were attending many conferences, online, closed groups, conferences, meetings, and explaining to colleagues and actually pushing them to think a bit forward and to go out from this, let's build bridges, let's make friends again, but really to sit and talk about what's happening, and to, to put this diplomacy actually aside and to talk as human beings, and to put our feelings on the table, and really to share the concern, and to make some brave decisions, because what's happening now, we need really brave decisions, and not to play safe. And for me, it was I learned a lot through this 9 months, but actually what I want to say about these small changes, what an impact we can make as a country. When we, in our beginning, as 30 years ago, when we became an independent country, a lot of Scandinavian countries helped to build this independence scene. They investing money to our festivals, they sending companies, because we felt the support especially from Scandinavian companies. And a few years ago, we started to do the same as being a very small country, but helping Ukrainians, actually contemporary dance field, our colleagues from Ukraine and Belarusians, through this all, revolution stuff, we are helping them as a country. We were sharing our knowledge. We are bringing them to our festivals, and we were bringing our artists to their festivals, because it was kind of need to share, because we knew how difficult is it and how important is the support. So even being very small, we can do a lot. And actually now, Lithuania is doing a lot and also gaining recognition as a country of cultural diplomacy, a very strong one, and with very strong voice, and sometimes very straight voice, very brave voice. It's like sometimes creating very awkward situations, but I think they will remember us for sure. And but it's very important not to stay silent. So from my side, like, really to talk. It's very important to talk. And doesn't matter from where you are, from very small independent company, organization, from very small country, from big one, doesn't matter. You have to talk and to express yourself, and really to be clear with your vision, what you want to do and what you want to reach. And not to play safe, yeah, of course.
Thank you very much, and not only for the answer.
Can I just quickly say thank you for sharing that example with us? And I think that is one of the kind of objective of our collective cultural diplomacy today, not just to, at every single occasion, at every international artistic cultural platform, to talk about Ukraine for the sake of only Ukraine. Because the war in Ukraine is ironically and tragically, is a chance for us to decolonize views on the whole region, on Ukraine, on Lithuania, on Latvia, on Georgia, on Moldova, on Central Asia. It is a chance to have a wider conversation about the fate of artists in Syria, or from Syria, from Afghanistan, from other places have gone through a conflict or war or just social upheaval. And I think this is really important, and really I find a lot of our audiences and partners really responsive to that idea, that this is not just about Ukraine. This war has triggered so many other problems, issues of the past and of the present. Then talking about Ukraine actually helps talk and hopefully solve so many other issues that we collectively are facing as nations, as societies, as people of very, very different backgrounds. But still, I find those similarities in our pasts and stunning how much actually in common structurally we have to share and we have to collectively address. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, and I have a temptation to finish the discussion on these very, very good words of both of you, and I thank you very much for this time and for the discussion, and for our audiences both here in Kaunas, in this beautiful place. And also those who watched us online, especially those who are watching us in Ukraine by the possible means. Not all people in Ukraine have such a possibility actually to be online these days. I would also like to thank our hosts here, Kaunas 2022, for having us at this discussion, at our previous discussion, for having this exhibition, and also for our partners in Ukraine, Renaissance Foundation. They made this discussion possible. So thank you very much again.